Welcome to the Labyrinth. I'm your host Pratham Pado. My guest today is Randell Stroud. This is his second time on the Labyrinth. He's a preacher, a paralegal, a martial artist, and also a near death gun violence survivor. In addition to all this, he's also an author who has written books like Spiritual Xanax and The Ninja Mindset. If you would like to buy his books or if you would like to check out his YouTube channel, I've mentioned the links in the description of the video. And as always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment because some of you may like this podcast, some of you may not, some of you may agree with me or with the guest, some of you may disagree, and that's fine. So let me know what you think down below in the comment section. All right, Randall, welcome back to the Labyrinth. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing quite well. It's been a couple of years, but I'm glad to see that you're doing well. I still keep up with your show and episodes and listen to some of your guests, and congratulations on your growing popularity. It's very awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to start by asking the last time you were on the Labyrinth was 3 years ago. How have you changed as a person in the past 3 years?
In some ways, I'm exactly the same guy that I was when I was 5 years old, and then in other ways, I'm way different. That the ways that I'm the same is I've always hated bullies. I've always been a champion for, you know, the the little guy in society. So I love challenges, and that way I'm the same. But I think the way that I'm different is last time that we spoke, I was really fixated on all these issues happening in the world, and I have been, most of my life. Whether it's like, my family has a big connection to South Korea, for example. So whether it's environmentalism and the fine dust air quality in South Korea, or wars happening, or corruption in the courts, just all these big issues, and just wanting to be this savior of the world type of figure. But I think in the last 3 years, I've kind of stepped back and started paying attention to the cornerstone of society, which is family, and really studying that, because that's where everything sort of grows out of. And I was like, you know what? I've been having some very deep conversations with my father, and a lot of people ask me, who was your favorite professor or teacher growing up? And I always say my father. He was my first teacher, and we still have very deep conversations. And I told my father, now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to remember some of those lessons that he gave me as a boy. And now that I'm older, they're making sense and I'm able to apply it in life. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of trying to change the world, perhaps if we just focus on building up the person in the mirror and fixing his problems, whenever you brush your teeth every morning, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. So start with that guy and then start looking at the family. If you can build a good person that's in the mirror and you can build a good family around that, then that sort of echoes into society. And I've had this new philosophy now where it's like, if you want to change the world, start with yourself and then build a family. And if you can't build a family, help somebody build one, or be a part of it. Everybody's a brother, an uncle, cousin. There's many different roles that we can have in our relative families. So that's something that my mind has been fixated on for the last, 2 years or so.
Yeah, I think fathers are very underrated. They're usually overlooked. They don't always take the time to highlight their sacrifices, but they do make a lot of sacrifices which we are not aware of. And yeah, I completely agree with you that we have to take self-responsibility. I don't think most of us, including me, can actually wake up one day and save the world. Even though we would like to tweet about it, or even though we would like to think that we can change the world, but we can start with ourselves. I agree with you.
Yeah, and a lot of people just spend 12 hours a day, getting into these Twitter debates and, making all these videos, and they're doing all this activism. in the comfort of their room, drinking a soda, eating chips, and they're arguing with some random person on Twitter. And I'm like, look at me, I'm saving the world. But in my view, the person that's saving the world is the everyday average guy that doesn't get celebrated. Sometimes when I'm driving down the road, I'll just look around and I'll notice a construction worker on the side of the road. He probably he probably has no followings on Instagram. He's not famous, nothing, but he's digging a hole and he's making a road that I'm going to be able to drive on for the next 10 years. And he's sweating, he's got dirt all over his face. And some people may ask, why would he do that job? He can't enjoy it. Why would that man choose to be um, a, a road builder? That's a hard job. You're in the sun all day. I guarantee you, there's a 99% chance you go up and tap that man on his shoulder, and you ask him, "What motivates you to do this job?" And I guarantee you, he'll say, "Well, I've got a wife and children at home that I'm providing for, and that's what makes it worth it." And this is why, if you've been noticing in my Instagram stories, and if you follow my YouTube channel, I've been talking a lot about this, birth crisis. Fewer people getting married, fewer people having children, suicide rates going up. And I believe that whenever I look at that construction worker and why he's working this hard, sweaty, uncomfortable job, and whenever you dissect why he's able to do that, that's where you find purpose in life. That's where you find the meat of humanity, not in getting some college degree or trying to blow up on Twitter or Instagram and become world famous. Like, all those things are cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, hey, but it's only fun for a moment. Oh, I graduated university. Look, I have this degree. A week later, you're not even celebrating that anymore. Now you're looking for a job. Now you're worried about something else. But when a man has a wife and children, or maybe you don't have any children, maybe you just have a sick mother that you're taking care of. But when a man has somebody that he needs to protect, that gives him unlimited motivation. And we're taking that away from people, you know? And even Elon Musk, he talks about this all the time. I mean, he's the richest guy on the planet. And he's asked all the time, what is your number one fear? And he says, the birthing crisis. I mean, look at South Korea. They're freaking out right now, throwing money at their citizens. Hey, if you just get married and have one child, we'll pay you $1,000 a month. And people are just like, I don't want to do it. So to me, everything that I've worked on in my life, and we've had a lot of conversations, you've studied some of the things that I've done. Listen, I've been in politics, I've written countless books, I've done it all. I've been a boxer, martial artist, I've traveled all around the world, I've had different, girlfriends and relationships, and now that I'm getting older, it almost seems like when I look at my sister, for example. She's a stay-at-home wife and mother, and she's got two daughters. And I see what she's doing, and it's like anything that I've done kind of pales in comparison to what she's doing. She's raising two tiny human beings and trying to mold them to become, the torchbearers for the next generation. So I think we don't romanticize that enough today. There's almost like it's a burden. I don't know about you're located in India, correct?
Yes.
So I don't know about in the Indian education system, but in the United States, back in the like 1950s and 60s, they actually had a class called home economics, where they would teach girls about, how to cook or how to sew and repair damaged clothing, how to, do time management, balance a checkbook, things that you need to do to manage your household. And they took that out of the classrooms, I think in the late 90s or early 2000s. So it's like right now, the number one crisis that we have is we live in a purposeless society. And if you look at Fight Club, have you ever watched that movie with Brad
Yeah,
Pitt?
I love that movie. Yeah.
Well, he has a famous monologue in that movie where he says, "We are the lost generation. We have no great war. We're all working these meaningless jobs that don't really mean anything. We come home and watch TV and we watch commercials about buying stuff that we don't need, and then we die. We had this entire life that's based around getting stuff." Um, and that's kind of where we're at. There's no, uh, you know, Nazis to fight. During World War II, every man wanted to join the military and go fight Adolf Hitler. We don't have a great war. We don't have some great, cause to fight against, because if you live in a even somewhat developed nation, I can go to my sink right now and turn on the water, and clean water just falls out. Whereas 200 years ago, my ancestors had to walk to a river and scoop up water and then bring it back and start a fire and boil it to get rid of the germs in it. But it's like everything's made for us now. We don't really have any real struggle. Like when is the let me ask you a question. When is the last time that you had to go hunt for your own food?
I've never gone hunting.
You've never gone hunting?
No.
Well, I
I
think
mean,
you'd
hunting
enjoy it.
is, yeah, I think I would, but hunting is not really a concept in India. It's not very popular here.
Yeah. But let's take a time machine and let's go 500 years back in the past. You know, your great grandfather was definitely killing animals. I mean,
Yeah.
probably even 100 years ago. You
Yeah.
know, but now we just go to the supermarket and we just pretend like it just happens. And this is why I have to laugh at the the lie that's been told to young women today, is that you know, you're a strong, independent woman. You don't need a man. But if you're trapped in a burning building, you're going to call the fire department, and there's a 99% chance that a male firefighter is going to show up. If your car breaks down and you don't know how to fix it yourself, you're going to go to a mechanic shop, and there's a 99% chance that that mechanic is going to be a man. You know,
Yeah.
whenever you go to the grocery store and you buy some food, most farmers are men. That food didn't just package itself. So everyone today is trying to chase all these fancy degrees and fancy jobs. They want to wear a suit. They want to be in an office building typing on a computer, but they're not really creating anything. They're just, you know, writing stuff on pages. But the people who are building things like this ink pen, the people that are making the cars, that construction worker that's making the roads, those are the people that's actually building society. And, you know, no woman complained about not being able to work a job 500 years ago because there was no air conditioning. There was no office cubicle jobs 500 years ago. 500 years ago, the only jobs were you could be a farmer, a soldier, and if you were lucky, maybe a merchant, if you were lucky. But most jobs back then were very dangerous. Like, could you imagine in the 1800s, before there was any work safety laws passed, and you were a coal miner? Matter of fact, I was looking in my family records. My great grandfather, his name was Rufus Stroud. He died because he got crushed to death by coal. He was working as a coal delivery person, and he was unloading coal, and the coal fell on him, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of it, and it crushed him and killed him. You know, and he was doing that job. Meanwhile, his wife is at home, and she's giving milk to her baby. Who has the more dangerous job? So I I really feel passionate about fighting against feminism. But a lot of people, and to me, in my opinion, a lot of people are worried about communism. A lot of people are worried about, North Korea, Russia, all these things. Like, listen, those are real things to worry about. They're real threats. But when you have an ideology that is telling women if you cook a meal for your husband, and you stay home and you know feed your child and you wash some clothes and cook some food, that's slavery. But if you sit in traffic all day and go to your job and then you ask your boss, hey, I'm hungry, can I have a lunch break? No, get back to work. And then you get a little paycheck and then you pay taxes to the government. That's freedom, you know? So even though I'm not a fan of feminism, that a lot of people will sort of have this reaction and they'll say, "Oh, you must hate women or you're a misogynist." No, I actually love women quite a bit. I think it's horrible what we're doing to women in society today is we're telling them, don't worry about having a husband or having children. Spend your 20s and even your 30s trying to focus on your career, and then you can worry about having a child. But then women go to the doctor and they're 35 years old and they finally do find a man and get married, but they can't get pregnant. And the doctor's like, well, you're 35, um, your fertility is pretty much gone. And in medical um, literature, a woman who gets pregnant when she's 35 years old, that's considered a geriatric pregnancy. It's a high risk pregnancy. A woman's most fertile years are between, like 18 to 26. And the women today that's in that age bracket, 18 to 26, when they're most fertile, they're worried about getting some job or some degree, or they want to travel, go to some concerts, get on some dating apps, hook up with this guy and that guy. And then in their mind, I'm going to have all this fun. Women are being told today to forego having a family. And then by the time that they realize they actually want one and their job is not really fulfilling them, they're too old to have a child. And you see all these videos on YouTube, women who are 40, 50 years old, and they're literally crying and saying, why did I prioritize my career so much? And I wish I just had a family. But see, we're preparing women the same way that we're preparing men because men are always told, hey, in your 20s, you need to lock in, build a career so you can make money and have a family because men don't have a biological clock. Keith Richards, who's a famous rock star, he's 70, like 3 years old, I think, and he just had a baby last year, you know? So, and it goes into the mentality, and I think this is what women don't understand is a career is not optional for a man. If you're a somewhat youthful, nice girl, there's always going to be some guy out there that is going to be willing to take care of you and allow you to be a stay-at-home wife, whatever. Men love providing. Like we don't mind paying on the first date. That's how we show our love and protection is by providing. So for a man, having a career is not an option for us, and we don't necessarily work a job because it's something that we enjoy doing. It's literally our duty as men to do that. For example, charge these things properly, and I think that's why you're losing me sometimes. So I apologize.
Yeah, no issues.
So I may have to remove these and just talk to you through my phone audibly, but we'll see how it goes. But anyways, when a guy has a girlfriend and you go to your buddies and you say, "Hey, I have a new girlfriend," what's typically the first question they ask?
How does she look, I guess?
Exactly. Is she cute? And then the second question might be, is she nice? Is she loyal? But where does she work and how much money does she earn is like way on the bottom of the list. Like we literally don't care. Like a woman could work at a fast food place, but as long as she's cute and she's nice, hey, we're in love. We don't care because we know as men, it's our job to pay for everything anyway, so we don't care where you work. But now, when a woman gets a boyfriend and she goes to her girls and she says, "Hey, ladies, I got a new boyfriend." The first question they ask is, "What does he do to make money? What's his career? Is he famous? Does he have status?"
Yeah, even if a daughter goes and tells her father, "Hey, I'm getting married," what's the first question the father's gonna ask? What does he do? Like, can he take
Mm,
care of you?
exactly. You know, so and here's another problem that I have too is I hear a lot of women that I try to um yeah, I think this thing just died. Are you still able to hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you here.
Okay. So we'll just do it this way. So some women that I've tried, talking with or getting to know, potentially date, they've asked me, what is your ideal feminine woman? I'm like, well, I'm not looking for necessarily a business partner. I'm looking for a potential wife and mother. So for me, the most feminine, beautiful woman in the world is a woman that is dedicated to, being a wife and a mother. And then as the kids get older and her time frees up, some women do return back to work or they might build some business on the side, but those first 5 years of a child's life is very crucial. And I think it makes sense for, the woman that gave birth to that child to actually be with that child and not hand it off to some daycare worker and pay someone else to do it. What's the point of having a child if you're just going to pay someone else to take care of it so that you can pursue your little career? So I told a woman this one time, and she said, "Oh, you're looking for a slave, a woman that's just going to cook and clean for you and just be your slave, and you just want a woman who's just a wife and just a mother." And that word "just" is very, how do I say? It is very abrasive the way that they say it. Just a mother, just a wife. Well, is it just a mother or just a wife? Because there's nothing small about giving birth to a life. It's probably the most amazing thing that you can do. You have some men who are architects and they can literally build buildings. They can design cell phones. There's all this technology. Like, I don't even know how this ink pen was created. I don't know how this earpiece was created. Like, it's all amazing technology. But there's one thing that's more amazing than any invention, and that's when a woman gives birth to a child. And it's like, that's the miracle of life. So why are we telling women that being a mother is not a career? And is it really being a slave to a man if he's paying for all the bills and all he asks you to do is, not cheat on him and cook some food and watch and take care of the child that you helped create while he pays for everything? Is that really slavery? And matter of fact, I'll challenge you and say perhaps the men are the slave to women because everything that a man does in some small way is geared towards attracting a woman. If women did not exist, I truly believe that every man would just sit around and drink beer and get fat and just play video games and not care. And a lot of men are doing that today because women don't want to get married. Men feel like, oh, okay, society's message is we're strong and independent. We don't need men. And that's literally what motivates us. Women is what motivates men. That's why there's a famous quote that I always refer back to, and it goes like this. When a man begins to earn a lot of money, his first thought is, I can finally have a family. I can finally take care of my wife and my children. But when a woman starts to earn a lot of money, she says to herself, oh, I finally don't need a man anymore. So the mentality is totally different. And when we live in a society that tells men we don't need you, we're independent, you take away a part of what makes a man a man. We are literally hardwired to want to protect things physically. That's why on average men have about 15% more muscle mass than women, and that's without training. And our bone density is about twice as thick of that as a woman. Our bodies are literally designed to withstand combat. Even our skin, men don't really get cellulite or wrinkles as easily as women because our skin is literally thicker than a woman's. We are built to withstand damage, you know. So whenever you take a woman and you try to tell her, okay, you need to be equal to a man, you're taking away what makes her special as a woman that only she can be, that only she can do. We've become so obsessed with trying to prove that a woman can do anything that a man can do that we've totally forgotten what makes her unique in being a woman and that only she can do as a woman, which is being a mother. I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question since we're having a conversation. As a man, I don't know, you don't have any children, do you?
Not
Okay,
and I don't have any children.
okay. But let's imagine that you're a father and you have a 1 year old daughter, okay? And let's say that your wife also has a career and your wife goes off to her job and she says, "Hey, drop off our daughter at the daycare center because I've got to be at work." And you say, "Sure, honey, no thing, no problem." So you're driving with your daughter and you pull up to this daycare center and you walk in there and you notice all the workers that are there are men. Are you dropping off your daughter at that daycare center?
That would make me feel very concerned.
Why would you feel concerned?
Uh, because I don't know these men, I don't know these strange men at all. So I don't because a child is very vulnerable and you don't know what goes on in the outside world. The world is a fairly crazy place, and
Yes.
giving your infant child in the hands of a stranger is quite crazy. Yeah.
Now, daycare to me, in my opinion, it's already a scam. I'm so lucky that I had a stay-at-home mother when I was growing up. I was never passed to some stranger, but I know that not everybody has that option. You know, I know that people are living all kinds of different situations, and I'm not judging those people. But now let's change the scenario again. You pull up to the daycare, and it's all women that work there. Do you feel a little bit more comfortable now?
I do. I guess this
Yeah,
is my inherent bias.
it's not inherent bias because as a man, men are very good at imagining dangerous scenarios. Men are always planning for danger. Even whenever I'm walking at night, I'm constantly scanning for threats. You know, men are just built that way. We're very protective. I always tell women, if you want to know if a man really loves you, he's going to be slightly protective and maybe even a little controlling. He's going to say, "Hey, that dress is too short. You know, I don't want you
Mhm.
wearing that." It's not because he's insecure, it's because he's trying to protect you. He doesn't want other guys looking at your body. And then as a father, if you drop off your daughter at a daycare center and it's all men that work there, your mind goes towards whenever he changes her diaper, he's going to be looking at her private area, another man. That doesn't feel good, you know? And then you're going to think all these other possible scenarios, and then all of a sudden, you're walking away. But if I drop off my daughter at a daycare center and all of the workers there are women, I say, oh, okay, women are naturally built by nature, by God, whatever you believe. That's what they're designed to do, is to take care of children. And even women that don't have children, even women that don't get married, if you look at the career fields that are dominated by women, it's nurses, daycare centers, customer service agents, because women love to communicate their feelings and their emotions. So all the things that a stay-at-home wife and mom does, teachers are overwhelmingly female as well. So all the careers that women are choosing, a lot of them are what you would do as a stay-at-home wife and mother. You're going to teach your children how to count, 1 to 10. You're going to teach them 2 plus 2. So I always tell women this: stay-at-home mothers deserve a lot more credit in society because they're not just a mother; they're a teacher, they're a taxi driver, because they're taking their kids to all these appointments. They're a personal chef. They're an emotional counselor. They have to listen to their child and predict their needs. So for me, I would even go so far as to say, in some ways, I'm a women's rights activist because what I'm active, um, what I'm fighting for is telling women, you know what? I think it's fair. I think it's unfair what we're doing to women. This is what we're telling women: is you need to go to school, get a degree, have a career, and then once you hit 30, then they're like, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have babies? And it's like, I spent the last 15 years of my life trying to get this degree and have this career. Now you're telling me, oh, you're 30 years old, your biological clock is running out, your fertility is running out. You need to hurry up and have a child. You're getting too old, and that's a lot of pressure on a woman. We expect a woman to have a career, to change diapers, to take care of a child, and to have multiple jobs. And then a lot of women just say, you know what, that's too much. I'm just not going to get married. I'm just not going to have a child. And then unfortunately, because we live in a society now where divorce is so common, I don't know about in India, but in the United States, 1 in 4 children have never met their father. And the majority of teachers in public school, in public education, are females. So this generation of young men, all of their mentors are women. So they end up growing up being very soft and being very in tune with their feminine nature, but they don't have any sort of masculine examples. And then so women are discovering, and this is something that I hear from women a lot. They're like, where are the strong masculine men that earn good money and are willing to take care of us? And so the women feel like they have to become the man that they can't even find anymore. But what they don't realize is we're stuck in this destructive cycle. Is divorce is becoming so common, so you have men that are being raised by single moms, and then these men grow up to be very weak and ineffective leaders, and then the women have fewer dating options because there's no more masculine men, so they're forced to become more masculine themselves so that they can take care of themselves. And then me and women just do this. They just get further and further apart. And then now there's no babies being born. There's no marriages happening. I want to ask you a question. Um, if you run a business, let's say it was a restaurant, a fast food restaurant. In order for a fast food restaurant to function, what type of workers do you think that you might need? Like a cashier? Well, what are some other positions that you could imagine?
I'd need some waiters,
Waiters?
yeah, I would need some cleaners. I would need maybe a receptionist if it's a fancy restaurant. Uh, yeah, cleaners, people who clean things.
Okay, so imagine you're the owner of this fast food restaurant
Mm.
and you have all these applicants. So all these people are coming in for job interviews, and every single one of them says, I want to be the CEO. I want your job. Can that business function if everybody wants to be the CEO?
No, everyone has a role to play. Everyone
Hey,
can't be
say
the
that again.
CEO.
Say
Ev-
that phrase again. Everybody what?
Everyone has a role to play.
Exactly. And that, if we bring back traditional gender roles. And listen, I believe in the Bible. You know, I got a copy of it right here. Ephesians chapter 6. It tells you the order of the family. It says God leads the man leads the wife, and the wife leads the children. That has been the structure of family since the beginning of time. It's only in the last 50 years that we've said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And look what we have now. We have utter chaos because we don't have a head of the household anymore. The man is no longer the leader of his family. It's now a man and a woman arguing about who's the leader. I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. No, I'm the leader. I'm the leader. And then the kids, if there are any kids being born, they're confused, like, who's leading us? And when it comes to these traditional masculine jobs like firefighter, police, or even being a pilot, um, men are much better in logical situations. This is why, in my opinion, not always, but I think that men are more effective leaders in jobs where people's life are on the line. Because, for example, when President Trump, whenever he got shot, he had a bunch of Secret Service agents, and some of them were women, and we saw that there was a lot of controversy around that. That whenever the gunshots went off, that female Secret Service agent was scared and kind of doing this. You notice that. So in a lot of these situations where you see a building falling or there's loud noises, women have a tendency to scream and freak out. They're almost like sirens. But what are they screaming for? They're screaming for a man to come. Well, women are like alarm systems. Ah, there's a bug. Ah, there's a burglar trying to break into the house. You know, so it's like every woman's a feminist until it's time to pick up something that's very heavy, or it's time to crawl into a, a burning building. Now, I'm not saying, I know some people are going to be listening to us and they're going to say, well, I know female firefighters, I know female police officers that are very brave. Absolutely. Matter of fact, where I'm living at right now, there was a building that caught on fire, and there was a woman that ran in there and warned the people and helped them escape. I'm not saying that there aren't brave women in the world. They do exist, but I'm speaking in general terms. The the exceptions are not the rule. And in this modern society that we live in, we're always searching for exceptions. Like, for example, kids that come from single parent homes, especially boys, they're about 7 times more likely to end up in prison, because they don't have that male structure. Boys who don't have a father figure, they lash out, they develop emotional problems. Girls that don't have a good relationship with their father, they're more likely to have a teen pregnancy. But then whenever you say these things, people get offended and they say, wait, I was raised by a single mother and I never went to prison. Congratulations. You're one of the exceptions. You're one of the people that was able to find a way around that. And good job. Like, congratulations. But we should be optimizing as a society to do what is proven. And what's proven is strong men create good families. They create effective leaders. And for the last 30 years, you know, like, both of us are in our 30s. We both grew up in the 1990s. I don't know about India, but in America, in the 1990s, we had this whole girl power movement. All these cartoon shows started coming out
Like
showing
Powerpuff
women,
Girls.
beating up guys and being action heroes, and all that stuff started, becoming, popular. But in the last 30 years, we've been pushing women need to get educations, women need to have careers, women, women, women. We have to protect women. But in that process, we have completely left behind young men and boys. And in the United States right now, more women have college degrees than men right now. More women own houses in America than men do. And a lot of people ask, well, why is that? Because men in this generation have completely lost their motivation, because they're like, well, if women don't want to be wives anymore and they don't want to be mothers, then why the hell should I work so hard? If they don't want us, then I'm just going to relax and play video games. Because, like we talked about earlier, men are motivated when they have somebody to protect, when they have somebody that is relying on them for something. Men love to feel needed. One of my dating advices for women is, um, if you want to test a man to see how capable he is, and if you also want to sort of build his ego a little bit, bug him a lot. Ask him for help. Babe, can you help me open this jar? Hey, baby, what do you think about this thing happening in the news? Ask his opinion about everything. And men love that. We love to know that our wisdom and our knowledge and our skills are appreciated. Men love to be needed. And this is why you oftentimes hear women say, I'm a strong, independent woman. I pay all of my bills. I paid my rent. I do everything myself. I'm a strong, independent woman. But have you ever heard a man say, I'm a strong, independent man. I pay all of my own bills? Duh, because that's what we're expected to do anyways. It's only in the last 50 years that women have really been so involved in the workforce. So I think for a lot of women, having a career is sort of like a something that they can kind of brag about. Like, look at me. Whereas for men, our job is kind of like our duty, where it's like, hey, this is what's expected for us. You don't really see men, bragging as much about like their whole personality is, I have this degree, whereas I saw this feminist on Twitter. She said, I broke up with my boyfriend 10 years ago, and I ran into him, and he asked me, are you a Mrs. now? Are you married? And she said, I'm not a Mrs., but I'm a PhD. I'm a doctor. And it was supposed to be this, big punchline, like, I don't have a husband, but, I have a doctorate degree. I'm successful. But that same woman, when she's 45, 50 years old, that career is not going to mean as much. And we can look in data, and this is backed up. If you don't believe me, research it yourself. A lot of women who are first time mothers, whenever they have that child, nearly 60 something percent, so more than half of women, once they become a mother, they end up leaving their careers anyways. Because once they have that baby and they hold it in their hands, they fall in love with it. And they're like, I don't want someone else taking care of, like, this is my creation. I don't want to go back to work. I just want to be with this baby. Like this is mine. So a lot of women, once they become a mother, their careers kind of just like go out of their head. Like my sister, for example, she got married quite young, in her early 20s, and some people were making fun of her because she was in school. I think she was studying to be a nurse or something like that, and she met a man who was a little bit older than her, and he was already successful. And he said, "Well, I'll take care of you. Like you're going to be my woman. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry about that stuff." So she dropped out of school and she focused on being a wife. And there were times where I would hear her say things like, "Oh, maybe I should have stayed in school. Maybe I should have made a career for myself." Um, but when she had her first child, that kind of just went out the window. And she's like, "Oh, I'm in love with this baby. I'm so happy to be a mother now." So I think that we as a society, if we want to see birth rates go up, we need to start talking about being a homemaker as an actual career, and we need to stop making fun of it. And we need to stop putting those kind of women down that want to prioritize that, because if you're not going to have children, unless you're trying to cure cancer or you're trying to, write some book that's going to change the course of humanity, um, what is there that's so worth doing? What's so more important than that? And I know that some of the counter arguments to having children, especially in this generation, is the economy. People say, well, rent is too expensive, groceries are too expensive, healthcare is too expensive, education is too expensive. Having a child seems like a huge financial liability. Meanwhile, you go to the Philippines or some African country, and you see some village chief with like 20 kids behind him, and he's like, too expensive. It's not really that expensive, but it just depends on what kind of lifestyle that you're willing to have. And listen, it doesn't really take that much to be happy. After you're able to clothe yourself and have enough food to eat, and maybe if you're lucky, some transportation, and you've got a bed and a roof over your head, all of your basic needs, once all of your basic needs are met, what more do you really need? What do you need to buy an iPhone? Do you need to buy some fancy, you know, clothes or something? Is that really going to bring you happiness? Oh, I didn't have children because it's too expensive, but I bought me an extra purse. Look at this handbag. That handbag is going to make you happy for what, a week, and then the excitement's going to wear out. But not everyone should be a parent either. And if you're a person that says, I hate children, I really hate them, and I don't want to have kids, then good. Please don't have them, because that's also a problem too. If you know that you hate children, then don't have them, please. But if you're not going to have children and you're going to make your career, your whole personality, um, you better be doing some groundbreaking shit. You better be curing cancer or doing some investigative journalism where you uncover some corrupt plot that takes down a a corrupt dictator like Kim Jong Un or something. Like, you better be doing something huge, because by not continuing your bloodline, your ancestors are like, bro, we did all that just so you could watch porn videos and play video games. We went through all that, and you're just gonna cut off your entire bloodline. I really don't get it. Like, whenever I look at your face right now, I see thousands of years worth of ancestors in your face. 2,000 years ago, your great 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 grandfather probably had a sword in his hand, and he was swinging it at some wild animal, protecting your great 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 grandmother from being eaten. And in his mind, he's saying, one day, my great 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 grandson is going to start a podcast, and he's going to talk to some amazing people and get some amazing conversations into the world that's going to change people's minds about how they think, you know? So your ancestors, their hopes, their dreams, their fears, everything, they live on through you. They gained immortality through you being alive. And I know a guy like Raphael Samuel, the anti-natalist, who you've interviewed many times, and I even had a debate with him once. And he's a nice guy. I don't dislike him, and I would love to meet him someday. But I think that his mentality is is very skewed, because I think this idea of family honor and being connected to your ancestors is completely lost in this generation. Like, when was the last time that you spoke to your parents about the history of your family tree?
Uh, this is something that I've been reflecting on a lot, because probably in my teens and in my 20s, I really didn't care much about my ancestry or my tradition. But as I've grown older, I've realized, because in the past couple of years, 2 years ago, my maternal grandmother passed away, and last year, my
Hmm.
dad's stepmother, who's like my grandmother to me, she passed away. So when you see your
Mm.
grandparents kind of getting old and sick, and when you see them dying, you feel like you've been deprived of your own ancestry. You feel like you have no understanding of your own history, and you would want to continue that. So lately, I have been trying to do some homework into understanding my own ancestors.
Well, you're asking me about some things that have changed about me in the last 3 years, and want to say this was maybe a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago. I went to, I think it was ancestry.com, and I signed up for like a free 30-day trial, and I became totally obsessed with it. I was looking at all my family ancestors, and I found my original ancestor that came to America. His name is John Stroud in the 1600s, and he owed some tax bill to the British Crown, and he heard about people going to this land, you know, and called America, and he was like, "Hey, I'm getting on this ship. I got to get the hell out of here." And he escaped England to get away from this tax bill. And he came to America to like just start over, and that must have been so difficult because now traveling traveling is not really an accomplishment anymore. You save up a couple of $1,000 or rupees or wherever you're at. You save up some money and you get a passport and you buy a plane ticket and then you just sit in the airplane for 12 hours. And then, oh, I'm here. But 200 years ago, before there were airplanes, before there were cars or buses, if you wanted to travel to another country, you had to get on a ship and you had to bring months of food with you. And people died on these journeys to travel to other countries. So traveling used to be an actual dangerous thing to do. So for example, the United States is a big country. On one side, you have Los Angeles. On the other side, you have New York City. 200 years ago, if you wanted to go from New York City to LA, you had to have a horse and a carriage and like I said, bring food with you. And on the way there, you're going to run into Native American tribes that might try to kill you. You're going to run into wild animals. Your 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 water supply might become contaminated, and then you get sick. So if you actually make it from New York to LA 200 years ago, you actually felt like you accomplished something. Like I risked my life to get here. So this all comes back full circle. Is I wrote a book a couple years ago. It is called Spiritual Xanax: God's Cure for a Sad Society, because I was looking at things like divorce, depression, suicide. Why are these things so common nowadays, especially in first world nations? If you look at a country like the Philippines, they're a very poor country, but their suicide rates are way lower than the United States, way lower than South Korea. South Korea and Japan, they have very high suicide rates. The United States, their suicide rates are getting pretty bad too. And it's like, what's the difference between these societies? Like in the Philippines, you literally have some people suffering from malnutrition. They're starving because they don't have food, but they're not committing suicide. And it's like, why is that? And I believe it's because in the Philippines, for example, or some of these very poor African nations, the people don't have time to just sit around and look at TikTok videos about their mental diagnosis. They have to spend 10 hours a day growing their own food, fetching their own water. They're so focused on their survival, they don't have time to sit around and cry about their problems and look at YouTube shorts about it. You know,
Yeah.
so they're actually engaged with their life. And the average Filipino, the average, Kenyan tribe, if you ever go to Kenya and you explore some of the countryside and see those villages, yeah, the people do have shorter lifespans. They don't have as much technology. Their lives are very hard, but everybody has a family. There's not a single person that lives alone, you know. And you have these whole communities. Like if you ever go to the Philippines, I'm even sure I've never been to India, but I've seen videos, and maybe it's changed, and maybe you can educate me. But whenever you were a kid back in the 90s, were you living in India?
Yeah, I was always in India. Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you were a kid, was it very common to walk around and see your grandmother, aunts, uncles, and then other kids in the neighborhood all playing together in the street. It looked like it was one big community.
It's true even to this day. Even to this day, I can just walk to a road nearby and I can see, kids from the entire neighborhood coming and playing soccer and playing cricket.
Yeah. Now, I'm in the United States, okay?
Mhm.
I've never met you personally, but I'm a big fan of your podcast, watching different things. But if I go outside and look out my window, you
Mhm.
see nothing. You don't see a soul. In the United States, it's very common for neighbors to not even know who each other are. Like, I lived in an apartment one time uh, whenever I was in Tennessee, and I lived there for almost 2 years, and I never spoke to my neighbor, not a single time. I didn't even know his name. So in Western societies or in so-called first world nations, like very technologically advanced societies like South Korea, Japan, United States, um, people are so plugged into their technology that they don't have any real connections to the real world, that there's no sense of community. And in Korea and in the United States, more than half of people live alone. So in these societies, people are spending extended periods of time by themselves, and they're on Instagram all day watching other people live their lives. And then they're comparing, well, that guy is more muscular than me. That woman's more beautiful than me. Oh, that person's going on more vacations than me. And then you start looking at your own life and comparing it, and you're like, well, I'm not a successful person. But you know what? If you just went to the gym, made a few friends, got outside, let the sunshine hit your face, eat some healthy food, go for a walk, listen to some music, get off your phone, you might actually feel better about yourself.
Yeah,
Because
I
one of the,
agree. Yeah.
go ahead.
So, those things are slowly changing here in India as well because India is getting very urbanized. I live in a big city, one of the biggest cities in the world, in Bangalore. We have like 14 million people, close to 14 million people living here. And one of the aspirations of people has become isolation. So I
Mm.
live alone right now in my house. So I'm probably the first guy in my family to actually live alone in a house because I don't think any of my ancestors have lived alone in a place. And more people are aspiring to live alone in apartments. And more people are talking about things like going on vacation to Bali or Japan. These are things that was not even heard of in my parents' generation.
And I read this study, and it said that chronic loneliness is as dangerous to your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And I truly believe that, because if you look at something as simple as holding hands with your girlfriend or even hugging someone, if you hug someone for at least 30 seconds, your body releases oxytocin, and that oxytocin reduces your blood pressure. Matter of fact, married couples or people that are in relationships that live together, if you cuddle up with your wife or girlfriend, whatever, people in relationships, they have accelerated wound healing. I thought that was very fascinating. You know, that people that have elevated oxytocin levels from cuddling, hugging, kissing, engaging in, sexual practices with their wife, and having that sense of safety and bonding is actually good for your physical health. Whereas if you're always by yourself, I get it, trust me. Sometimes I love being alone, just turning off my phone, do not disturb, and I don't want to talk to anybody and just have solitude. Sometimes it's very healing. But if you have too much of that, it can also start to feel like it's a prison as well. Everything's on me. I have to do everything myself. Like You're in this bubble, in this world that you can't get out of. Then you just naturally, instinctively start reaching out to other people. And that's what people are doing on social media. People are lonely, and they think that because they have 5,000 followers on Instagram that they have 5,000 friends. Well, newsflash, you don't. Because whenever I was a kid, back in, let's say, 1999, if you wanted to send someone a friend request, you had to walk up to them and say, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" That's how you sent a friend request in 1999. You walked up to someone and said, "Hey, you seem like a pretty nice person. Do you want to be my friend?" Okay, great. Let me get out a piece of paper. Tell me your phone number. I'm going to write it down so I don't forget. Okay. I'm going to call you tonight. Okay, it was nice meeting you. Now you're just scrolling on your phone and you just randomly follow some person and you don't even know who they are. It might be a 300-pound man, but the profile picture, it looks like some young, handsome guy. So yeah, okay, yeah, I'm gonna follow him. Or, oh, she looks beautiful. I'm gonna send her a message. Oh, that's not even her real profile picture. You don't even know who you're talking to, you know. So in the real world, if you want to follow someone, it means that you actually walk behind them and follow them. But on the internet, following someone, you just push a button. And whenever things come so easy, it loses its value. Just like, we were talking about earlier, water. This might sound like a funny question, but humor me. Do you brush your teeth every day?
I do.
Okay. Whenever you brush your teeth, you probably do it over a sink, right?
Yeah.
And are you able to just turn on the water and just clean water comes out?
Yeah.
How often do you think about how amazing that is?
And not very often.
Yeah. So when everything's easy, oh, I don't have to walk to a river and just grab water. I just turn a little nozzle and it just falls out in front of me. You don't have to hunt for food like I mentioned earlier. You just walk to the grocery store, or nowadays, people even call Uber Eats and they get food delivered to them. Everything's so easy that we don't appreciate it. Even sex. Nobody wants to get married and have children anymore, but everybody's completely fine to have sex. So you meet some random person on Bumble or Tinder or Instagram, whatever dating app, and you go meet up with them and have sex, and then you never talk again, and then you keep doing that, it loses value. Whereas in our grandparents' generation, holding hands with a girl was like a huge deal. Oh my God, did you see him? He was holding hands with her. But now it's like people are sending pictures of their body parts to each other and they don't even know each other. So it's like nothing is sacred anymore. Nothing is appreciated. Everything is my father, my father has a name for this. He says, we live in a fast food society, and it's a metaphor. Everything is microwavable, instant, 30 seconds or less, now, now, now. And nobody appreciates anything. Oh, this girl hasn't texted me back in the last 30 minutes. I'll just text these other 100 girls that I follow on Instagram, or hey, me and my boyfriend got into an argument. I'll just download Bumble and look, I've already got 1,000 matches. Look at all these options that I have. So we have this mentality of overabundance, and everybody's afraid to stay at one job or to stay in one relationship. Maybe there's something better, fear of missing out. And then we end up just chasing our tails and we exhaust ourselves constantly looking for a new vacation destination, constantly looking for a better job, constantly looking for a more beautiful girlfriend or a more handsome boyfriend or a husband that makes more money. So I'm going to divorce this guy and I'm going to find somebody better. and then you're chasing and you're chasing, and then one day you're 60 years old and you're on your third marriage and you don't have any children, or if you do have any children, they're all by different people, and your life is just a mess. You know, I heard this quote, and it said, "Some people want to spread their wings, and some people want to spread their roots." Think about that. You know, some people want to spread their wings. They want to go everywhere, be everywhere. But then some people, they want to set down their roots and let them expand far. If you're always going here and there and you're constantly moving, nothing has a chance to grow. For example, imagine this is a flower pot and I put a seed in there and it starts to grow. If I'm constantly moving the plant and putting it into new soil, it's going to be disrupted. The roots never have a chance to go deeper and get stronger. I'm constantly moving it. But if I find just one patch of soil that's really good and I plant it and I water it every single day and I don't move it, it has chance to grow very deep, long roots. So what is the what is the point of me saying all this? Is if you want to, if you're a young man or even a young woman watching this, when you're in your 20s, sure, you can go travel the world, have a million boyfriends, a million girlfriends, do this, do that. Or you can be the guy that marries his childhood sweetheart or his high school sweetheart. And people will tell that guy, "You're stupid. Aren't you curious about all the other stuff that's out there?" But they have a chance to build together and to dig those roots. Like my father, whenever he met my mother, my father was very poor. You know, he was working at a carnival. My father, he didn't even graduate from high school because he had nine brothers and sisters. And my mother, she wasn't sure if she could have children due to some kind of medical condition, but she discovered that she was pregnant. And my father was like, "Well, I can't work at a carnival anymore. I have to figure out something to take care of this wife and this baby." So that motivated my father to start his own business. And he was doing construction and flooring and different things. And it became very successful. But the first few years that my mom and dad were together, he was not earning a lot of money. And I'm sure that there were women, some of my mom's friends maybe, I'm sure that there were people making fun of her. "Well, why did you marry that poor guy?" "Oh, well, he's starting a business. I believe in him. I'm going to stay with him." And then it grew and grew and grew. And a lot of people today, especially women, they're looking for a guy that's already a finished product. But that kind of guy who has built his entire life by himself, you know, he's 40 years old and he's a millionaire, but he's never had a wife. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to start dating lots of women and he's going to be having all this fun because he's like, "Hey, I did this on my own." But if you find someone when you're young and neither of you have much, but you build a story together and you weave your lives together, and then that becomes memories that bind you. Even in the Bible it says, "Marry the wife of your youth." You know, so you want to build this shared history together. You don't want to meet someone when you're 40, 50 years old. You've already lived this entire life without this person, and then now you have to catch them up. "Well, I was doing this for this years and this and that." I think it's a very beautiful and rare thing today when someone says, "I met my husband when I was 18 and now we're 65 years old and we've been together this entire time." I, I find that like so amazing. Like how is that even possible? Like, don't you have arguments? Haven't you thought about breaking up? But they worked through all those storms together. And
Uh,
go
and
ahead.
let me, yeah, just say that, the world There's a lot to unpack in what you said, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this will have their heads exploded. But regardless, I understand the appeal of traditionalism, especially when I see first world or second world countries, people are getting more and more isolated. They've become very ungrateful towards their own ancestors, and especially in first. I don't know exactly why in East Asia and places like South Korea and Japan, why they're having very low fertility rates. Maybe they have a different culture. But when I see the West, when I see Europe and North America, I feel that the one of the main reasons is because of high value on materialism. They watch all these music videos of young women twerking all the time, and there's an excessive obsession with money and meaningless careers, and to add to all that, there is this politics of wokeism telling young people that you can be whatever gender you want to be. You can get meaningless college degrees in things like gender studies, and which
Yeah,
don't actually contribute. At least if you're getting a college degree in engineering or architecture or finance, that makes
yeah,
sense. But things like
yeah,
gender studies, that doesn't make any sense. And these are the same people who end up accruing a lot of student debt in US. And I know Joe Biden is forgiving their debt or whatever. And these people are so ungrateful towards working class people, especially in swing states. And we've seen in the U.S. elections, in places like Pennsylvania or Michigan, people, the working class people, have voted against the woke party because they felt like they have been forgotten. Or that's the message that I've gotten from this election mandate. So I want to talk a little bit about this election. What did you think about Trump's victory?
well, this might be surprising to you, but I do have my opinions about the prospective, presidential candidates and everything. But as I've become more, I guess, steeped in family traditions and especially in biblical wisdom, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Do not put your faith in princes or kings, for man will fail you." So every human being is infallible. There's things in every presidential administration, things that have been said and done that I agree with, and things that I disagree with. And some presidents, I agree with them a lot more, and then other ones, I agree with them a lot less. But um, one of my mentors, he told me, he said, if you really want to know if someone's educated on politics, ask them to say three good things that any president has done, but then also give three negative things that they did during their administration. Because a president literally passes hundreds of executive orders, maybe even thousands. So what we see in the news media is just a small snippet of what the president and his cabinet is actually doing. Any politician for that matter. Politicians are voting on hundreds and hundreds of bills, and I really doubt if any voter is going to a politician's voting record and seeing every vote that they've ever made, every bill that they've ever signed off on, every executive order that they've endorsed or did not endorse. So if you do enough research, you can find actions that every president has done, which you'll be like, oh, if I was in his position, yeah, that's actually reasonable. But if you do enough digging, you're going to see something that you don't agree with. The point that I'm making is, aside from my own uh, personal opinions or endorsements, here's the fact of the matter. Regardless of who gets elected as president, prime minister, wherever you live, when Monday morning comes, you're going to go to work. No matter who's president, you're going to go buy food at the grocery store. Your life is not going to stop. So if you're one of these people who is crying that President Trump got elected and you're like, oh my God, my life is over. Well, it's not, because every other president in history that's been elected, life always goes on. And if you're one of these people that says, yay, Trump got elected, all my problems are going to be fixed now, that's also stupid, because he's just one man. He's not God. He can't fix your life. If you're overweight and you're unhealthy, it doesn't matter who gets elected. Unless you start going to the gym and eating better, you're still going to be overweight. If Kamala Harris got elected or Donald Trump is elected, no matter who's president, if your wife is cheating on you, she's still cheating on you, and your marriage is still a wreck. And you've got to do something about that. No matter who's president, you still have responsibilities for your own life, and you've got to take accountability. I've never in my entire life, and I've been through several presidential elections now, I've never said these words to myself. Oh, President so and so got elected. My life is over now. I've never said that. I've never lost any sleep over an election. And I've never stayed up past 11 o'clock watching the presidential map. Well, like here, this last election went down. I was looking at all the electoral votes. I was looking at the voter map. You know, certain states were turning blue, certain states were turning red, and I was watching it, and I was just like, I'm tired. I'll find out in the morning. Put my phone down. Slept like a baby. I woke up the next morning, checked my phone. Oh, Trump won. Huh, that's cool. So, anyways, I gotta take a shower. I gotta get ready to start my day, and life goes on. And no matter who's president, there's gonna be certain challenges that happen. The stock market is gonna go up. There's gonna be maybe foreign policy disputes that happen with other countries. Things are gonna happen regardless. And if you don't have a plan in place as a man, if you don't have a plan in place for your finances, your physical health, all these things, then it doesn't matter who gets elected anyways. Your life is not organized, you know? And again, this goes back to my original point about education in school and what's being taught to children. We're teaching children 2 plus 2, how to read. We're teaching them all these, random regurgitated facts to memorize. But do you know what we're not teaching our children in school? How to be a man, how to defend yourself with martial arts, how to fix your car if it breaks down, how to be a good wife, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, how to prepare a meal for your children, how to change a diaper. And you know what? Schools should not be teaching these things. You know who should be teaching these things? Your parents, your family. Even, and I know that this is a bigger thing in India that used to be a bigger thing in the United States, but multi-generational households. How popular are those in India?
Extremely popular. People do live with their parents. Uh, Two, three generations live in the same house. I grew up in a joint family. When I was born, for the first 21 years of my life until I moved out, I lived in a house of 14 people. That was me, my parents, my uncles, aunts, and grandparents.
Now, some people would cringe at that. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. But I'll tell you a really quick story. Whenever I was a kid, there was this really short Latino boy. His parents were from, I think, Guatemala. And we used to call him Peanut because he was a really short kid. You know, he was shorter than everybody else. And he would walk home from school with me, and he lived on the same street as me. And I noticed that there were always a ton of people at his house. There was always like a grandmother that was, standing on the front porch drinking some tea, and then there'd be an uncle out in the yard, and he's like fixing on some car. His whole house was always full of people. And I said, why are there always so many people at your house? And he said, oh, that's my family, my uncle, my aunt, my grandmother. They live with me, and I was like, wow, that seems very chaotic. But as I got older, I started hearing stories about Peanut and his family. Oh, did you hear about Peanut and his dad? They own a gas station now. 2 years later, oh, did you hear about his family? They opened up another restaurant. They're opening up all these businesses, and I'm like, how are they doing this? Well, they have 10 people living in one house. They don't have to hire a babysitter because the grandma's doing it for free. Everybody else is working a job, and they're combining their income together, and they're investing in properties. They're starting businesses, and their family is almost like a military unit. Everybody has a role, a specific role to do. The uncle was a mechanic, so he fixed everybody's car in the family that they did not have to go to a mechanic shop and spend a bunch of money. Oh, Uncle Joe will do it for free. Oh, so and so has a child and they have to go to work. Instead of sending it to a daycare center, grandma is the designated nanny for the family. She will watch everybody's child for free. Everybody has a role in the family, but in Western society and in many developed nations, the culture is when you turn 18 years old, it's time to get the hell out of the house, and you've got to pay your own rent. You've got to go to school, start your own career, and then, like we talked about earlier, women are also being told that they have to be independent. So mom and dad are both working, and then the child is being raised either by a nanny who's a stranger, or whenever they come home from school, they're just watching TikTok all day, and then they're getting their brains brainwashed. So they're not actually being raised by their family, but for the vast amount of human history, humans have been tribal. We've been a part of a tribe or a community. But in places like South Korea, in the United States, it's all about you and your career, especially in America. We have extreme individualism. We don't care about anybody but ourselves. At least in Korea, even though I'll say this about Korea is they're a little bit less creative than Americans because we're a bit more experimental in the West, which is a good thing and a bad thing. That's why we have like a lot of art and different things here, and a lot of free thinkers. But in Korean society, everything's about family honor to the extreme. If you don't get into a good college, some Korean families will say you're disowned. Unless you become a doctor or a lawyer, you're not my son anymore. You are a disgrace. So there's a lot of pressure in Korean society to get into the best university and have the top job at some corporation. And that used to work 50, 60 years ago, whenever society was more traditional. The man was working really hard to try to get this very high paying job so he can take care of his wife and children. But now in Korean society and in American society, the men and the women are competing for the same jobs. And I think people don't understand basic economics. We talked earlier about how people are saying how expensive it is to have children and to have a family. Let's explore why that is. I don't know about in India, but in the United States, whenever COVID happened, the government was paying people to stay home with unemployment benefits. That they were getting like some people were getting like $2,000 a month in free money to to just stay home. And did that happen in India at all? Were people being paid to stay home?
Not really, not really. I think some people got free groceries, but there was no free cash.
Well, in the United States, and this caused a huge inflation problem too. It was not good for our economy, at least in my opinion. But People were being paid to stay home, and McDonald's is not known as a high paying job. It's fast food. It's not really a fancy job to brag about having. It pays minimum wage, like $8 an hour. But whenever COVID happened, McDonald's was so desperate for workers that they raised their minimum wage from $8 an hour to $16 an hour. Some places were even paying $20 an hour because they were so short on workers. So I did some digging and some research. When women entered the workforce, um, the wages for average workers began going down because of supply and demand. In 1950, let's say that this is a company right here, okay? Only men were working in 1945, let's say 1940. Women didn't work jobs back then, so only men were applying for jobs. But now that women are working and they enter the workforce, companies now have twice as many people applying for that same job. So they're no longer stressed about having competitive salaries. Oh, if you don't want the job, I've got 10 other people that are applying. I'm sure one of them will do it for this low pay. But I always have a joke that I like to say is if every woman in America said, I want to go home and be a stay-at-home wife or mother, or I want to go move back in with my parents, and I'm just going to cook and clean for my father and brother, and I'm just not going to have a career. Wages would go like this because companies would have a lot fewer people applying for jobs, and they would be more desperate for workers, and wages would go way up. And we saw this happen during COVID. During COVID, a record number of women became stay-at-home moms permanently because you know what happened? During COVID, a lot of people got laid off from their jobs and the government was paying them to stay home. And a lot of women fell in love with it. They're like, man, I didn't realize how much time I was missing with my children. And a lot of women just refused to go back to work and they're like, I'm just going to stay here, you know? And then they also realized that they were saving money because some daycare centers charge $500 a week. That's $2,000 a month that some women are spending in childcare. And it's like if you just stayed home, you could save that money, you know. So to bring this conversation full circle, I have a question I want to ask for your whole audience is when you're on your deathbed and you're dying, what do you think that you're going to wish for more of? And I can tell you about this. Are you familiar with what a notary is?
Yeah, person who writes wills, agreements, will.
Not necessarily. So a notary is someone that verifies signatures on official documents. So a notary is sometimes in a bank, but they can also travel. So I used to be a traveling notary. Like I've had a lot of different careers in my life. I've done a lot of things, but someone paid me to, go to someone's house to notarize a will. And what a notary does is they will check for two forms of ID and they will witness the signature of the document and then they will record the date and time and it becomes official record. So I had a notary assignment. I had to go to this old man's house. He was dying. He was very sick and his wife was there with him. And we were notarizing a bunch of documents. And me and him got into this amazing conversation. He said, yeah, I've got diabetes and I've got cancer and I don't think I'm going to live much longer. And I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I started asking him for some advice, and I was like, I kind of said it as a joke, but it turned into a serious conversation. And I was like, you got any advice for a young man like me? And he said, well, I'm probably going to die soon. And I wish that I was a little bit nicer to my wife and kids. I wish I had spent more time with them. Uh, I wish that I had not stressed out over so many things that didn't really matter. And everything, all of his regrets were based around wanting to spend more time with people and develop his relationships. He never said, "I wish I made more money." He never said, "I wish that I had earned another college degree." He never said, "I wish that I was famous." He never said, "I wish I took that vacation in Maui." You know, he didn't say everything. All of his regrets were based around his relationships with people. And so, my challenge to you and your audience is I want you to close your eyes and just imagine that you're a 90-year-old man, you can barely walk, and you're laying in bed. What are you going to wish for the most in that moment? And that will tell you what you need to live for in your life. Because right now, we have a society that doesn't really give us a lot of purpose, you know. But like you said earlier, people are going to university and getting all these useless degrees so they can sit in an office and type on a keyboard all day long. But they're not having children, they're not having families, people aren't making real friends anymore. There's no longer a sense of community, and we're living for what? So we can get money and buy more stuff? When you're a 90-year-old man laying on your hospital bed dying, you're not going to say, man, I really wish I could take a vacation and buy me, you know, a new iPhone. That sure would be nice. You're not going to be saying that. So it's like my challenge to people is whatever you're doing in your life, make sure that it's going to matter in 50 years from now. And there was a meme that I saw. It was sort of taking up these stay-at-home wives and mothers, and it was a cartoon of a woman that was wearing this doctor's uniform, and she said, "I'm a scientist and a doctor," and she's talking to this old woman, and the old woman in the next scene, she has five men standing behind her, and she says, "Well, I may not be a doctor or a scientist, but I raised five of them. These are my five sons, you know." So it's like, I'm not saying that careers are important, you know, and some people do have careers that are very important. Like you have cancer research personnel. You have people like Elon Musk, who's developing Neuralink and artificial intelligence, like all these things that are going to change the way that we live. But even a guy like Elon Musk, he's the richest guy in the world, and even he said, "My life would be meaningless and pointless without a family because I'm building all this for them." And
I guess that's
go
why
ahead.
he's got tons of kids.
Yeah, he's got like 12 kids, and you can even challenge me on this and do your own research, but married men make more money than single men. And whenever I first discovered that statistic, it really boggled my mind. Like, why do married men earn more money on average than single men? Because if you're married, your wife always wants to go out on dates, and you've got kids that require clothes and food. It seems like it would be more expensive and you would lose money. But then I dug into the psychology of it. Whenever a man becomes a husband and a father, his protective instincts get activated. Now he wants to work harder. Now he wants to get that promotion. Now he wants to grow his money because he wants to be a provider. And that's why, and women don't understand this, but I've met a lot of like career women, and they say, "I don't know why men don't want to date me. I have a very high paying career. I have a master's degree. I'm very educated. I'm a very independent woman. And I never make a man pay for the date. I always pay for everything. But men don't seem to like me. Why is this?" And it's like, well, you're stealing his role from him. You know, if if a woman is carrying around a gun and she's got $1 million in her hand, and she says, I can protect myself and I can provide for myself, then why do you need us around? You'll never hear a man say, I'm a strong, independent man. I don't need a woman, because men understand there's some things that we just can't do. You're never going to see me breastfeeding my child. It's literally impossible.
This
So my
reminds me
big
of
message, go ahead.
yeah. This reminds me of the song that was played during Trump's one of his conference. You know that song? It's a man's world by James Brown. It starts with
Yeah.
this is a man's world, but it would be nothing without a woman or a girl. I think that's kind of the motivation for both genders to be attracted to each other.
Yeah, and it's really funny. I'm kind of a history nerd, and if you look into Cleopatra, she literally used her sex appeal to convince other men to conquer entire civilizations for a chance to date her. And men are like that, like I remember being a boy in church, and I would see some pretty girl that I had a crush on, and my little immature way to try to impress her was, whenever we were setting up for some dinner or some event inside of this church, I would grab as many chairs as I could and carry them, and try to prove how strong I was, hoping that she would notice that, like, oh, look, he's carrying all those chairs. He's so strong. So it's like, men, we get a lot of motivation and power when we feel needed. And that's what's missing in society today. It's the reason why you see so many men who are addicted to pornography, video games, why so many men are just giving up because they don't feel appreciated. For example, do you know the International Women's Day? Have you ever heard of this holiday? So,
It's on March 8th.
okay, so International Women's Day is celebrated. It's all over Google. Everyone talks about it. You go on Facebook and you see International Women's Day celebrating women. But what day is International Men's Day?
Uh, it's it's the beginning of November, but to be honest with you, I uh, I don't think most men give a damn about International Man's Day. Just for them, we don't really. Most of us feel like we don't need a Man's Day.
Yeah, men are very good at self-validating. Like, I, I saw this funny YouTube short, and it was like, men's motivation in the gym versus a woman's motivation in the gym. And it shows this woman working out, and she has this inner monologue in her mind, and she's working out, and she's saying, you're strong, you're independent, you're beautiful, you don't need a man. And she's just saying all these positive things to herself. You're so beautiful, you're so smart, you're amazing. Every woman thinks that she's a 10, that she's perfect. But then it cuts to the man, and he has his headphones on. He's working out. You're weak. You're poor. You need to work harder. Nobody cares about you. You need to be strong. You need to honor your ancestors and become the strongest member of your bloodline. And like, men are not coddled by society like women are. For example, if you're okay, I can tell you a real life story. When I was, I think, 16 years old, I was in a shopping mall, and my parents had gotten divorced, unfortunately, and my father bought me a cell phone so he could stay in touch with me. And it wasn't one of these fancy smartphones, it was like a flip phone. But at this time, not a lot of kids had cell phones, so I was kind of like a cool kid, like, oh, he's got a cell phone, wow. So I was in a shopping mall, and I got a text message that one of my friends had died in a car accident. And I was kind of, upset by it. I wasn't like hysterical or like crying or making loud noises, but I kind of just put my head down, and I probably had like a single tear that like flowed from my eye, and I was trying to be quiet and discreet. A few minutes later, a security guard comes up and says, "Sir, you're making people feel uncomfortable. You need to leave." And so I left, and I kind of wiped my tear off and, sucked it up. Or as society says, man up. That's a phrase that we hear a lot whenever men are struggling or we feel like we're upset. Wipe your tears, man up, get over it, be strong. And that's what I did. 2 years later, I went to that same shopping mall and I was eating some food and I was just, having a normal day. And I looked up and I saw this girl who was crying. She was sitting there, she was kind of doing this. And then a few minutes later, there was a group of strangers surrounding her. Baby, are you okay? They're consoling her. Do you need a ride? Do you need anything? And I was just looking at that like, wow, it's like two completely different reactions. When society sees a man cry versus a woman crying, there's a different feeling about that. That's why there's a joke that goes around. It says there were no feminists whenever the Titanic was sinking. You know, whenever that ship was sinking, they were like, women and children first. Nobody complained about patriarchy. They were like, get me off this ship. And all the men stood there stoically, I want to protect my wife and children. I'm willing to die for them, you know. Or, for example, in Ukraine, in Russia, in that war, all the men are being conscripted into the army and they're being forced to fight. And the women are fleeing these countries and they're going to, you know, uh, Poland or Romania or whatever, and the men are fighting. And there's a podcast called Fresh and Fit. I'm not sure if you ever seen this podcast, but they had a lot of discussions about men and women. And there was a woman on there. She was wearing like very revealing clothing, and she was a very beautiful woman. And she was on the show for some reason, and they were asking her questions like, "Oh, where are you from?" She said, "Oh, I'm from Ukraine." And they were in Miami for this interview. And if you know anything about Miami, Miami is like a party city, sex, drugs, like lots of crazy stuff. And this woman is on this podcast, and she's like, "Oh, I'm originally from Ukraine." And they're like, "Oh, tell us more about you." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm married. I have one kid." "Oh, where's your husband?" "Oh, he's in Ukraine fighting." And then the guy's like, "Wait a second. I literally met you in a club last night, and you were dancing on me, and I invited you on my podcast, and your husband is fighting in Ukraine for his life, and you're sitting here partying in safety." And that's the world that we live in. And again, I want to reiterate something. I'm not I'm not against women having the freedom to have a career or work. Do whatever you want. Do whatever's right for you. But all I'm asking is that I think that we need to be more honest with women and say, hey, if you're going to pursue this career and you're going to put marriage and family on the back burner and you're going to make this all about your life, you need to know about some of the consequences that are going to happen. Because by the time that a woman hits 30, 90% of her fertility is gone. And by the time that she hits 35, especially 40, having a child is pretty much impossible and very risky to her health. So a man who's 40 years old and single and he has a really good career with a lot of money, he still has the opportunity to have a family. But for a woman, when she hits 40, that ability is kind of over for her. And a lot of women um, are victims of that. They're like, why didn't anyone tell me that this is how it's going to be? Because when you're in your 20s and your 30s and you're young and you're beautiful and you're getting all this attention, it feels like you have all the time in the world. But then one day you wake up and you're 60 and you're like, where did my whole life go? And that also goes for men too. listen, if you're a man watching this podcast, and let's say that you're 22 years old, and all you do is play video games all day, and you're like, I'm still young. Someday I'll get that college degree, or someday I'll start investing my money. Someday I'll start that podcast. Someday I'll write that book. And then someday turns into, oh, I'm 30 years old now. Well, I'm still kind of young. And then now you're 40. And then now you're freaking out. Oh man, I need to get my life together. And what a lot of young people think, both men and women, they're like, well, I'm in my 20s. I'm going to party. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to focus on university, whatever. And then whenever I turn 30, I don't know what it is, that magic number 30. Whenever I turn 30, that's when I'll get married and have a family. As if when you turn 30, God pushes a magic button. Here's your husband, here's your wife, here's your children. It doesn't work like that. And I've learned in my life, because I'm in my 30s now, in my whole life, I've maybe met two women that were like marriage material, like, wow, she might actually be a good wife or mother someday. But the vast majority of people that you meet are not going to be compatible with you for marriage. So if you do meet that person and you're like, well, they're a really great person, but I think I want to party and have a little bit more fun for a couple more years, it might take another 20 years to meet a person that's on that level, especially in this generation where people with morals and family values are becoming smaller and smaller. So if you do meet somebody, I don't care what your age is, but if you do meet someone that is compatible with you, and I believe in the 80-20 rule. If you're looking for a perfect person, you should marry God, because that's the only perfect there is out there. But if you can meet somebody and you agree at least 80% of the time, that 20% where you have some disagreement, you can just forgive each other or you can work through it. But everyone's looking for perfect. They're looking for that guy that's 6'2" and he has $1 million and he has a perfect jawline and all this kind of stuff. And then men, same thing. They're looking for that supermodel girlfriend that looks like a perfect 10 and all these kind of things. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be good enough, and they have to be loyal to you. And this is another topic. I know I'm kind of jumping ship here a little bit, but another topic that I want people to be aware about, because as far as my own personal career, um, I come from a legal background. I used to be a paralegal, and I was a private investigator. Um, but I've seen how the markets have been changing. And for the last 3 years, I've been studying cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Everything's becoming more digital and more cyber. And when I was in San Francisco, I saw a Domino's delivery vehicle deliver me pizza with no driver. I used an app, I ordered the pizza. It showed up in front of my house and it said, meet your driver outside. And this window rolled down and this mechanical arm came out with a pizza on it. And I took it. And then it drove off. And I was just like, what is going on? You know? So I think people don't realize the rate in which artificial intelligence is growing. In China, I saw this interesting video. In China, they're taking NVIDIA AI chips and they're putting them inside of sex dolls, and they're taking real human hair and they're making synthetic skin, and these sex bots are powered by batteries so that they're actually warm, so it feels like a real human person, and they have an NVIDIA AI chip and you can talk to it.
That's crazy. I mean, uh, that the world is going in a very strange place. And on one side, I see all of these crazy things going on, like AI, and I've even had a transhuman. I've had a Dutchman on my podcast who had more than 20 microchips inserted inside his body. He can open his door. He can make
You have to
payments.
send me that link, man. I have to
I
watch
I
that.
I will. I will. He was one of the first transhumans on the planet. He can open his car door with just swiping his hand. I see a lot of people going in that direction, but I also see a lot of hope. There's some silver lining because I see the rise of the trad wife movement in the West and even here in India. There are a lot of young people, a lot of Gen Z people talking about early marriages, getting married in their early 20s. You see a lot of videos trending on Instagram of homestead women where a lot of women they pick out raw milk from the cow and pasture raised eggs. So I see a lot of bad things, but I also see a group of people going in the right direction, choosing practical traditional values. When I say practical traditional, of course we can't all live like the Amish. We all have to depend on modern technology to a certain extent. So I see a lot of young people blending traditionalism and pragmatism in the right way. So I do have some hope there.
Well, something else that I'm very excited about, and I wish this would become more popular in South Korea. I have friends in South Korea, and my grandfather was in the Korean War, so my family has a great connection to South Korea, and I study their society a lot. And in the United States, the skilled trades or the individual trades are a lot more popular than in South Korea. Like my father, for example, he never even graduated from high school and he never went to university. In Korea, that's like social suicide to those people. If you don't get into a good university, Koreans believe that you're just going to be a garbage collector. Like your life is ruined if you can't get into a good university. But in the United States, it was starting to trend in that direction, like South Korea, where it's like you have to go to university, you have to get a good degree, or your life is going to be horrible. But for the vast um, time in human history, humans survived by their individual skills. In the early 1900s, I think roughly 80% of people in the United States in the year 1900 were self-employed. They owned their own businesses. Every father, maybe he was a blacksmith, maybe he was a farmer, maybe he was, raising horses, maybe he was a locomotive repairman, whatever. Every father had a skilled trade and they made a business out of it, and then they would teach that skill to their son. But then somewhere in the 1970s, you know, maybe late 60s, there was this trend of you've got to go to school and get a job and work for somebody else. And that's how it operates in South Korea is they don't talk about being a plumber or an electrician or starting your own construction company. Everybody wants to be doctor, lawyer. And I know that this is a big thing in India too. A lot of Indian parents that they want to have a successful son that's, doctor, lawyer, engineer, the three big professions. And if you're not one of those three things, then you must be a loser. But I met a man in South Korea. He was an older gentleman. I was talking with him and I asked him, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm an elevator repair technician and I own my own business. And this guy was driving like a Rolls Royce and it was like brand new, you know, very nice car. I mean, this guy had a lot of money and he said he never graduated from university. He's like, yeah, I went to university for 1 year, but my family was poor and I really needed money. So I started learning how to repair elevators. And he went all around these different cities in Korea, and he was getting these contracts with these companies. Hey, I'll be your elevator repair person. And then he started training. some employees and he trained them how to do it, and then now he just manages all of it and makes all this money. Um, and that's becoming more popular in America now. Like more young people have figured out, like you said, going to university and getting some useless degree in, you know, liberal arts or basket weaving or gender studies, you're not going to get a good job with that. You're not learning any real skills. I mean, to me, in my opinion, being a professor is like a fake job. Like your job is to stand in a classroom and just, tell your philosophy to all your students, and they're paying you $100,000 to listen to you talk. But you're not building anything in society. So there's a movement in America now with a lot of young men who, instead of going to university, they're going to plumbing school to learn how to be a plumber. It's not a fancy job. You're fixing toilets, but they're making $120,000 a year because it's in demand. Nobody wants to do this job. So plumbers, electricians, um, um, mechanics for cars. These are things that AI can't do, you know. But a lot of these office jobs where you're working in an office and you're typing, I'm going to tell you something. If you work in an office job, AI is taking your job in the next 5 to 10 years. It's gone. So me, I'm starting to get into cybersecurity, penetration testing, and robotics. If you're the guy that learns how to repair a robot, you've got a safe job. So there's this movement now for people to learn actual real skills instead of just, oh, I'm going to open up this program and I'm going to type this and that. All that stuff's going to be automated in 5 to 10 years. And I think that a lot of people are going to have a radical shift in how they live their lives and trying to find purpose, because having a job, and I understand this for a lot of women, and I want to backtrack a little bit because I talk to my sister a lot, who is a stay-at-home mom, and her kids are getting older, and the kids don't need her as much, so she's having more free time. And after a while, you can start to feel bored. So having a job is not just about making money. I understand that for some people, having a job can give you an extra sense of purpose. It's not all about making money. Some people will tell you, my job doesn't pay me a lot of money, but my job allows me to help people, and that makes me feel important, especially for people that don't have children or they don't have a family. You, for example, um, let me ask you just a personal question. Why did you make the Labyrinth? Has anyone ever asked you that on this show?
Well, I've always worked in finance. I still work in finance, and I work sort of the boring cubicle jobs that you described. But I did those jobs, and I still do that job because I need money. I need to survive.
Yep.
I've worked for a couple of American corporations, and right now I work for a German company. It's primarily for money, but
Yeah.
it can
I
be
get it.
quite boring. It can be quite
Mm.
boring. And when you are in office, it's like real life LinkedIn. You are expected to stick to the script. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Yeah, we can work on this. Everything is so scripted. Nothing feels natural. Whereas this feels real. This feels natural. I think I wanted a reality check, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I started the Labyrinth.
Well, why did you name it the Labyrinth?
I named it the Labyrinth because the labyrinth is sort of like a puzzle or a maze, but where you can come from one direction and I can come from the other. You can take a right, I can take a left, and we can go in different directions. But at the end of the day, we can meet at the center and we can, have a meaningful conversation. You come from a totally different background. I come from a totally different background. You have a completely different upbringing and perspective on life, which I cannot even comprehend. I can talk to you for a couple of hours, but I can't really, I don't have the I don't have the same lived experience as you. And I've spoken to different people from around the world, And that truly is a sort of a labyrinth because we are coming from two completely different corners of the world. We have a completely different set of regrets and achievements and pains and struggles, but we can have a common we can have common perspectives when we start to talk to each other.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing too that just language is so powerful. And this podcast that you're doing, if you were not able to speak English, or I was not able to speak any of the Hindi dialects, this conversation would be impossible. So um, I I really I kind of don't like it, but I do like it how English is becoming like this universal language. But at the same time, I think that Americans need to do a better job of being more cultured. A lot of Americans are kind of like, we're the center of the universe. America is the greatest nation on earth, rah, rah, rah. But a lot of people in other countries try to learn about the United States or try to learn English. So one thing that I noticed in countries like South Korea or or even places like China. I mean, I've never been to China, but in some areas where English is not as commonly spoken or learned, those people are at a huge disadvantage because the largest companies on the planet are English speaking. And there is some powerful literature that's out there that's only written in English. So English is a very universal language these days. So I think that when it comes to being a teacher, a lot of these professors and universities, they're teaching all this wacky stuff about, there's 300 different genders and they teach you all this their version of history, but to me personally, I stopped gaining any valuable skills from school after about maybe the sixth grade. After I learned how to read and write and do arithmetic and maybe some algebra, although I've never really used algebra in real life that much. But after about the sixth grade, everything in school just felt like I was memorizing a bunch of just random facts. And then as I got older, and like I said, I'm kind of a history nerd. As I got older and I dug into, you know, ancient artifacts and different texts, and I would read, journals from people that lived during those time periods, and I started realizing the version of history that you learned in school is their version of that. Like if I ask your mother, tell me about your son, and then I ask your father, then I ask your best friend, everybody's gonna have a different version of what they know about you, and then you're gonna write a book about your life, and you might leave out a few things that you're embarrassed about that you don't want nobody to know about. So in order to get really educated on history, you can't just go to a university and say, look, I have a degree in history, I know history. If you want to know history, you've got to get out into the world and you've got to talk to people who actually lived through it. You've got to do some investigation. Something that I used to like to do was I would go to my local library and I would ask the librarian, I want to look at some of your archives. I want to see some of your records that haven't been touched in 60 years. So we'd go to this back room and there'd be a stack of, documents and there'd be dust on it. They'd wipe it off. And I was looking at their census and I was looking up some of my ancestors. Wow. My great great grandfather also lived in this city and he did this and he did that. And then you can start seeing things for yourself, looking at trending data. Well, how many women worked in 1940? Oh, what jobs did they do? You can actually study society. Studying history and studying sociology are two important subjects, but more than anything, the real education is about practical skills, and I learned very little practical skills in school, and I've done a lot of schooling in my life. I have a paralegal uh, certification. I've got a ton of certifications. Security Plus, Net Plus. I was a distinguished honor graduate in a bunch of different programs, and those are all fine. It looks good on a resume, but most of the things that I learned it in my own free time because I was motivated. Like I want to tell you a really quick example. Um, the great and late Bruce Lee had a famous quote. He said, "All knowledge is ultimately self knowledge." All the skills that you have are skills that you most likely acquired just through life experience, the school of life. And me becoming a paralegal, I think I talked about this in our last episode together, but for people who didn't watch that, this is the greatest lesson that my favorite teacher taught me, which is my father. Like I told you earlier, my father did not even graduate high school, but he's one of the smartest and most intelligent people that I know. Whenever I was a little boy, my father constantly had his nose in a newspaper. And I was like, why do you read the newspaper so much? And he said, I'm trying to expand my vocabulary. My father would come across a word that he did not comprehend, and then he would grab a dictionary and then look it up. And he taught himself vocabulary, and he would study stocks because back in the 90s we didn't have Google. You actually had a newspaper that you got every morning, and he would look at the stock market, and he would tell me about it. Oh, whenever the price is low, that's when you buy more of it and you wait for the price to recover. My dad was teaching me all this, and the number one lesson that my father taught me was, he said, never ever wait for permission from someone else to be successful. You don't need someone's permission slip to be successful. Listen, I'm not against education, especially when it comes to being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. Some jobs definitely require some schooling in a university. But if you're motivated enough, you can teach yourself almost anything, especially in this generation. You have access to limitless information on your cell phone. You can go to places like Udemy and Coursera where they have free college level courses on any topic that you can imagine. But now, going back in my life, in the year 2014, I spent my whole life wanting to be a powerful, masculine guy. I want to be this boxer, this martial artist. Because I used to get picked on a lot whenever I was a kid because I was kind of short back then. So I became obsessed with martial arts and boxing, and I said, I'm gonna become the most powerful person. No one's ever gonna bully me or my friends ever again. And I became a very, good fighter. Um, but when I was around 19, 20, I was in a martial arts competition, and I kind of injured my arm, and I couldn't use it very well for a couple of months. And during that time, I was doing a lot of self reflection, like this type of career is not very sustainable. Like my body's going to get old one day. Like, what am I going to do? How can I protect people if my body is not always going to be strong? Well, God answered my prayer. I was driving out of town to go see a friend that was a few hours away, and I got pulled over by the police. They said you weren't wearing your seatbelt, but I was. Whenever he pulled me over, I took off my seatbelt so I could, gather my documents and present it. But he said, "Oh, you're not wearing your seatbelt. I'm going to have to write you a fine or a violation for this." And it was $100. I was a 20-year-old kid, and he's issuing me a citation for $100 for something that I did not do. And I told you earlier, I really hate bullies. So I got in my mind, I'm going to fight this ticket. And everybody laughed at me, said, how are you going to fight it? You're not a lawyer, you know, and you don't have money to hire a lawyer. And it's just a traffic ticket. Why don't you just pay it? I said, no, it might only be $100, but it's the principle. So the court date was 2 months away. So I went to my local Vanderbilt law. Vanderbilt University is one of the top universities in the United States, and they had a law library that was open to the public during the daytime. Well, guess where I was every single day for the next 2 months? I was in that law library studying the law and how to write motions. A motion is a document that just, allows you to make certain requests in court, like a motion to dismiss the case, a motion for discovery, to request evidence. So I was learning how to write motions, and I was studying statutes and laws and all these things. And people thought I was a student there. They were inviting me to sit in and listen to lectures, and I was just hanging out, and everyone just assumed that I was a student. And then one day they were like, "Hey, where's your student ID?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not a student here." And they was like, "What?" Well, you're only allowed to be here during the hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then it's closed to the public. But I was hanging out until 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So after 4 o'clock, if you're not a student, you were supposed to leave, but I was just staying. And then there were some janitors that worked there. I became friends with them, and they kind of turned a blind eye. And long story short, I submitted a bunch of documents to the court, and I asked for evidence, and I made all these legal challenges. And the officer in the state of Tennessee could not respond to my documents properly, and they said, "You know what? We're going to go ahead and dismiss your case for lack of evidence. So you're free to go." And I was like, I just gained a new superpower. I can defend myself with the pen. Sometimes the pen is mightier than the muscle. So then I became obsessed with learning about the law. And eventually I got a job in a law firm, and they were looking at my resume, and they was like, "You've never worked for a law firm before. Why should we hire you?" And I was just like, "Go ahead and ask me about a Supreme Court case." And they were like, "Okay, break down People versus Lopez." Oh, People versus Lopez was a case involving a police officer that was off duty, and he saw someone that was a victim of a crime, but he chose not to intervene. And this Supreme Court case determined that police officers have no duty to protect, even when they are, whenever they are off duty, they have no duty to protect. And this caused a lot of legal challenges in the United States. And then they were like, impressive. Can you write a motion for me? And I had a laptop with me. It was an old secondhand laptop. And I said, "What would you like me to write?" And they said, "Write up a motion for discovery and a motion to dismiss document. Give us an example." And I wrote one from scratch. No template, nothing. No chat GPT. Chat GPT didn't exist back then in 2014. So I'm in their office and I'm typing it up, and I turn my laptop around and I say, "How does that look?" And they're like, "Wow." And they said, "Okay, we're going to do something that we normally don't do, and we're going to give you a shot. We're going to let you work here on a probationary period for 2 months, and if you do well, then we'll keep you full time." Long story short, I became the manager of an entire department in this law firm, and you know, I had lawyers knocking on the door to my office. They would come in, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they were asking my opinions about case law. And then one day, someone got curious and said, "Hey, what university did you say that you went to?" And I said, "Well, I never went to one." And they became very jealous of me because these people were paying student loans because they went to university, and they had a lot of student debt. But I was working the same job as these other legal researchers, and I had zero student debt. And they felt very jealous of me. But that interview that I took for that job, It was over a 2 hour interview. They grilled me, but I proved to them, even though I don't have this little piece of paper, I'm just as good. So my advice to people, just like what my father taught me, is listen, if you can get that degree or that scholarship or that piece of paper, go get it. And matter of fact, even Bill Gates said this, who was a college dropout. The best thing about university is the connections that you make, with people, um, and you develop people skills. But um, with or without university or a degree, if you are the smartest guy in the room, if you know your job better than anybody, I truly believe that if you're a good talker and you have good communication skills, you can work anywhere you want in this world, and there's always a legal loophole. Even in Japan and South Korea, they're very strict on who they allow to have work visas in their country. But little do people know, because I was a legal researcher, even without a college degree, if you can prove that you have at least 10 years of work experience in a specialized field, you can get a special exemption and still get that work visa even without a college degree. And almost no one knows about that legal loophole. So my advice to people is stop asking people for permission to follow your dreams and be the person that you want to be. If listen, Abraham Lincoln was a self-study lawyer. Matter of fact, in the United States, there are 7 states that allow you to become a lawyer without going to university. But you have to take a very lengthy bar exam, and very few people are able to do it, but some people have. So whatever it is that you want to do in life, listen, we live in a digital age. Our ancestors must be so jealous of us because we literally have unlimited information in the palm of our hand on our cell phone. If you want to learn how to play a guitar, go to YouTube and type in how to play guitar and you can learn right now. What are you wasting your life on? Watching pornography, watching cat videos on YouTube? You can literally be whatever you want to be, but now be realistic too. You know, oh, I want to be a world famous actor. Well, that's a very specialized kind of field. But if you really want to learn a skill, whether it's to be a plumber or a repairman or a businessman, whatever you want to learn, the odds are you can Google it and you can find some course or some video or some book that can teach you how to do it, but you have to have the self motivation to go do it. My mind is bulletproof, and you have to bulletproof your own mind.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Randall. Thank you for your perspective. There was a lot to unpack over there. We spoke about a wide variety of topics. I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you, a lot of people will disagree with you, but this was a very layered conversation, and I'm grateful to have this conversation with you.
Well, I'll close things up and just say one final piece here is um, the point of me saying all this. If I die tonight, if this is my last day on Earth, Um, I came on your show today because I just want people. Listen, I'm becoming very aware of my mortality and the fact that I am going to die someday. And as you get older, you become more and more aware of that. So, whatever you're doing in life, act with a sense of urgency, with calculated urgency. Death is reaching for us constantly, and um, fight for what's important. Get your life into perspective and focus on what really matters, and stop wasting your life. And you can do it. The only person that you need to believe in you is that person looking in the mirror. And don't be afraid. Don't apologize for being what God made you. If you're a man, be the best damn man that you can be. And if you're a woman, be the most lovely woman that you can be, and don't apologize for that. And I wish everyone um, happy health and a great family and peace and prosperity. And thank you so much for having me.